This how you know this training session is gonna be good, boy. There you go. Wherever you
All
are
right,
right
let's
now is
try
good.
this. Yo, so I'm always traveling.
Okay.
I'm always on the road these days. I'm based in Atlanta, but I'm currently at an Airbnb, so I have no control over my internet situation. So apologies, but I'm here. Can you hear me now?
No, it's all good. Everybody's been throwing up their favorite emoji to affirm good connection, and we got it because you're outside.
Well,
It's
praise
all
all
good.
the internet people out there that are sending me their blessings. So thank you.
Yes. Yo, it's a pleasure to meet you, man. I'm gonna act like no one's watching and just talk to you like it's just us, which is the best way anyway. It's such a pleasure. I was so excited to hear about what the Liberation House is doing. And yeah, first of all, where are you if not in Atlanta? Where are you?
Yeah, so I'm currently in Bankhead, Atlanta, these days. But I've been over the last couple months. I've been doing this loop between New York, DC, and Atlanta for Liberation House and for other activism work these days.
Nice, nice. Thank you for your work, man. We need it. And in this moment, I pray that you're drinking water and being good to yourself. This moment is tough, man. And I pray that there's protection around you. It's tough, but again, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing
Um,
shout outs for Bankhead in the chat. So thanks,
yeah.
Bankhead, Atlanta.
Yes. 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 So first tell us a little bit about Liberation House and then we'll go from there. And yeah. What's Liberation House? How did it start?
Sure.
What's it doing? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Liberation House is a movement organization coming out of the movement for Black Lives. And essentially, we do three main things. The first thing is try to produce culture that supports the movement for Black Lives, trying to make sure that we're creating freedom songs that capture um, the essence, the spirit work of our movement. So we released a freedom song album called The Black Joy Experience a year ago,
Wow.
really trying to capture the songs from the front lines of the movement. So check
How do
that
you do
project
that?
out. How do you create freedom songs? How do you do which part?
Well, how do you capture the song of the front line of the movement? Like I don't I
Yeah,
don't recall hearing songs when I've been in protest, but there
yeah,
are.
yeah, definitely. The Black radical tradition spans long and far as far as offering up ways for us to tap into the spirit work of our time. So, I mean, this is like the history of the SNCC Freedom Singers or Nina Simone.
Yeah.
But folks don't really know that our generation, folks who are Generation Zers or millennials, actually have created our own freedom songs that describe our own movement. So
Wow.
as we were creating the organization Black Youth Project 100 back in the day, about 7 years ago, my professor, Dr. Kathy Cohen, brought together 100 Black youth activists. And at that same moment, we were in the room when the Zimmerman verdict was released about the Trayvon Martin situation. So you can imagine the intensity of that moment in that room. But the beautiful thing that came out of that moment was a sharing, a teaching, a conjuring up of some of the freedom song chants that came out of Freedom School with Marion Wright Edelman. If we think back to Freedom Summer, and with that tradition as a foundation, Black Youth Project flourishes today, really creating and spreading this freedom music and liberation chants around the country and around the world. So I'm sorry that you went to a protest and didn't experience that. I really feel like every protest, we need to be singing and dancing our way to the
Yeah.
revolution and to liberation.
Yeah.
And I know you know that. So look, next time
Oh,
you out there, yo, you need to be. I'm gonna teach you a couple songs and chants so you could be leading them.
yo, I'm so ready. I'm so ready. I mean, I personally I use music at the house to cry with, to move my
Mm,
body with. It liberates me. Even as a kid, it's always been something that I could go to, even before I knew what liberation or pain or anything was. It was always my go-to. And like in watching past clips from our ancestors, like I know that like Nina in that world,
yeah.
but now I didn't know that there was still a movement inside the movement of music that I so that's great to hear, man. I'm gonna be close to that.
Yeah, and it really is necessary for our survival. So part of Liberation House's work is to make sure that we are producing that culture that allows us to truly be free in a
Hmm.
world that doesn't want to see Black and brown people be free. Which takes me to the other aspects of Liberation House. So freedom music and cultural production is one of the main instruments of our work. But we're also doing another piece of organizing folks in the house and ballroom community towards liberation and justice. So this piece of the work, folks might have heard of house and ballroom community culture. I'm actually a part of the house and ballroom community in the House of Garçon. But a huge,
Yeah.
some folks might not know the community. You might have seen the HBO show Legendary. You might have
Yeah.
heard of the documentary way back in the day called Paris is Burning.
Burning. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's so many cultural formations. But we work within the house and ballroom community, really trying to make sure that we're building up systems of liberation in contestation of systems of oppression. So we know that we're living in a world where, when a Black trans woman walks into a homelessness system that's supposed to be helping and supporting her, many times that system will create further harm and further oppression in her life rather than lessening harm in her life. So we know that in response to that, many marginalized groups have created their own systems, their own spaces, their own liberatory realities in order to navigate and fight against systemic and institutional oppression. So I'm very passionate about being a part of the house and ballroom community and being able to work with that community to really be able to, like, what are the radical dreams that we don't have to wait for one day for white supremacy and institutional oppression to be over, but we can live in that freedom at the moment. So that's another arm of our work, doing all the
Dude,
organizing work in the house and ballroom community. Yeah.
even that alone, how many people are on your team or on your staff, or how big is Liberation House? I mean, this sounds, that alone is a journey and a mission that could be lifelong. So I'm curious how you have support.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a team of about 10 consultants that I partner with, really dreamers, liberators, frontline organizers,
Amazing.
folks who have really want to work over the next several generations to imagine a society that doesn't only work for a few of us, but that works for all of us.
Nice.
But I mean, the house and ballroom community, which like we're in deep community with, is about 30,000 people all around the globe. And it's really just an army of young radical folks trying to dream up a world that works for everybody.
Fire, fire. And why do Broadway trainings when this work is also so important? Like, I feel lucky that you were gonna interested, or I don't know why you're interested. I'm like, why does he want to do this for Broadway?
Yeah, yeah.
These
So that
trainings.
brings me to the
Yeah.
third arm of Liberation House, which is really trying to build a space for political education in the
Mhm.
world. Um, so much of the work we're doing, my last job was as a senior policy analyst at the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and they were on this 15-year journey of becoming an anti-racist organization, and uh, I ended up leading their racial equity team, being the co-chair of their racial equity team. And out of the lessons in that space, just realizing that this is a body of knowledge that one, not enough people have access to, and two, this is a body of knowledge that is literally trying to be censored today. If we go back about 3 weeks ago, President Trump passed an executive order to ban racial equity trainings for federal employees. So we're really seeing an attack, not only on critical race theory, but around a movement of saying we have to educate ourselves on the issues that we're experiencing and that we're navigating today. It's not a coincidence that we're living in a world where the word white supremacy feels like an evil attack on some, but it's really just the reality of the world that we're living in. And if we can't
Right.
be able to articulate and educate each other on what is covert and overt white supremacy, how does it show up in our world, as we're seeing the Proud Boys called out on a national stage at the debates this
Right.
past week.
Right.
So this is really about education, but this is about activation.
Yeah.
It's about bringing people up to speed on, how did our movement get to where we are in 2020? Not only what is the last 100 years of Black radical tradition movement building and a fight to build power, but what is the last 10 years where our generation has been on the front lines, really since Occupy Wall Street to Ferguson, all the way to where we are now with the largest uprising since the death of Martin Luther King, what some might call the largest uprising in all of American history. So it's about building a political analysis on the arc of that history. Where does that knowledge base come from? And who are those who came before us that were teaching and educating and building these spaces where we could be free to love and to experience joy?
Man, in your experience, and then I want to talk about what those trainings are and what's happening in each of them. Um, in your experience, are people in a position and at this moment to learn, to want to learn? What's the willingness of people to participate in learning? Everyone's angry, everyone's feeling something, but
Yeah.
how many people are actually wanting to learn at this moment?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that I've actually seen in the last 4 years since the 2016 election, I've seen a large increase in the eagerness of wanting this body of knowledge, of wanting to learn about what is the difference between equality, equity, and liberation, of wanting to really be steeped in a deep history of movement building and what does it mean for people to be continuing this fight of wanting to be free in this world. We suffer from amnesia very easily, not only in this country, but around the world. So I think this is not only about political education, but it's about a revisiting of just what happened before, you know?
Yeah.
So I see a lot of eagerness around this on both sides of the aisle, which is why you're seeing our president banning this body of knowledge, literally trying to censor critical race theory. Literally, the quote was literally banning trainings on white privilege, as if even white people understand that they have certain privileges in society and that there's disproportionality throughout these government systems. This is not a new thing. This is not a new phenomena. This is kind of basic. And that is exactly what they have started to attack in the last month to put censorship within the government on it. So yeah, it's a crazy time to be alive, brother. It really is. But we're out here. We're out here. We won't stop. And I think particularly when we think of the Broadway community, this community is just so brilliant, so creative. They are storytellers. And so much about critical race theory is about telling the story of an oppressed people. So I think that this will be an exciting engagement as we partner with, shout out to Sara Ramirez for bringing this together. But this will be an amazing experience where we get to partner with folks throughout Broadway to really bring this education about and hopefully to create a plan for organizing moving forward.
Yeah, for sure, man. One of the first things I asked on the email when we began to talk was, who's this training for? Is it for white people or is it for Black people? And it was made clear that, no, this is a training for everyone. And, like when I think about like who needs to learn, I'm like, my first instinct is, I want them to learn. I want them to figure that shit out. And in like reading about the trainings, there's actually a lot there that like I'd like to lean into more to understand my own lack of knowledge or my own like participation in like anti-Blackness. And these are things that I'm just now starting to even grapple with as myself, even as an advocate. So I'd love to go down the rabbit hole of what these trainings are.
Sure, absolutely. So it's going to be a series of 3 trainings throughout the month of October. Our first one is taking place this Tuesday, 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And the first training is just a 101 on racial equity. It's going to cover the basics to make sure that moving forward, we all have the same language. So it will cover what are the 4 different levels of racism. It will cover what's the difference between equity, equality, and liberation. What is disability justice? What is gender? When we think about soldiery, sexual identity, gender, inclusion, what does that mean? So the first training is Equity 101, talking about the kind of foundations of intersectionality and critical race theory. So that's training 1. Is kind of just the 101 on it's going to really focus a lot on terminology, and make sure that we can move through the second and third training with the same language, with talking about the same things. Many times I think such the division that is really being stoked in our country and around the world right now is we're saying the same words, but we don't have the same definitions around the words that we're saying.
Yeah.
So we're talking across each other.
And also, who is writing these definitions?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Where do the definitions come from? Exactly.
Right. I was in a conversation like with someone, and he was like, I want diversity in casting. I was like, well, yeah, I want diversity in casting too. But I bet we have different definitions of what that is. And like, how do we even come together on one standard of a definition and agree on that?
Yeah. I mean, even when diversity comes up, so many people, the first thing that comes to mind is plantations were diverse. Diversity actually doesn't bring us anything. Like, anything can be diverse, but are people really included in the conversations? Do you have an equal seat at the table? Do you have the same amount of power when making decisions? Right. So even all of these terms are political terms.
And how are you allowed to show up at this table? Are you allowed to wear your dashiki at this table, or do you need to wear Lululemon to be fully seen?
That's exactly right. So making sure that we are talking about the history of this language and these terms will be critical to that first training. The second training will take a deep dive into something that I call white dominant culture. And many times we're walking through the world living in a culture that isn't necessarily being called for what it is. So simple things like this idea of preferencing the individual over the collective. That is a characteristic of white dominant culture that we just take for granted. No one calls it that. So the second training will dive into, well, what is, particularly in the world of professionalism, in the world of nonprofits, in the world of cultural production, what is white dominant culture? How do we call it out when we see it? And how do we shift to a liberatory culture that works for everybody, not just white male property owners? If you know the history of white male property owners in this country, everything in our Constitution was preferenced towards white male property owners, as far as the right to vote, the right to own land, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we, many of those laws and much of that history has not been undone. We still have a world that preferences certain communities over others.
Question for you. With that said, do you feel like in order for us to have full liberation, that all of those laws and all those systems have to be rebuilt or burned down or reformed, or is that something that, like, in the training we'll learn together?
Sure. No, I can speak to that right now. We're definitely going to talk a lot about systemic and institutional oppression. Much of my work throughout the last 10 years of my life, I'm a social worker by profession. Much of my work is about how do we reimagine new systems in some cases, and in other cases, how do we reform the systems that we have? And I think the answer to that question really dives into the history of which system you're referring to. If we're talking about the criminal justice system, like it's not doing anything that it's not meant to do at this point. Right. Like it is doing exactly what it was created to do throughout history. So when people say, "Oh, reform that system," well, it's how do you reform a system that's actually not broken? It's actually doing exactly what it's meant to do. Yeah. So we really have to critique the origins of some of the systems. I've done a lot of work with child welfare systems throughout my career, and really trying to identify why is there so much disproportionality when it comes to child welfare systems, such larger rates of Black kids or LGBTQ youth that enter into these systems? What is the experiences of those marginalized groups once they enter into these systems? So they still don't even count LGBTQ youth in child welfare systems today. They're just invisible. So much about these. Yeah, they don't count LGBTQ youth. Part of my job at the Center for the Study of Social Policy was going around the country into child welfare systems and trying to get social workers to actually just ask the question, are you LGBTQ? And then how do we support you in that identity? Many of the social workers still said, oh, it's against my religion to even ask that question. Well, how are you a social worker? How are you a person that's trying to support and uplift the identities of everyone in our society if they're coming into the system and you can't even talk to them about it? Yeah. When we think about, I'm really in the space today where I think our imaginations are the only things that are going to get us free.
Amen.
The world created today was not created for everybody. It was created for the few of us and not the majority of us. So I think there has to be a reckoning that comes in our generation.
Wow.
That really says we have to imagine something better, whether that's reforming a system or taking parts of a system that does work. But at the end of the day, like, what we have today is not working for us. The last example of just kind of systemic and institutional oppression, I'm doing a lot of work these days in the homelessness movement. So I'm working with True Colors United, which does a lot of work around LGBTQ homelessness, Away Home America, and a bunch of other organizations who are literally trying to end LGBTQ homelessness. Some of the issues that we're facing today are only issues because there's no political will to end them. So we did a occupation over this summer in New York City where we occupied outside of City Hall for 30 days, demanding for them to cut the police budget by $1 billion. As we stood outside in City Hall Park in New York and looked around the buildings around us, it was pretty obvious that these buildings are basically empty. Like, the homelessness problem in New York right now is only a homelessness problem because we don't have the political will to house people. It's not a problem of space. It's not a problem of like not having the ability to house these people. It's a problem of we don't care. So until we can build the political education, the political will, and the compassion to actually reimagine systems that actually work for everyone and not just for a few of us, that really is the goal of this training series. And I think starting with a space like Broadway, where just folks are so centered, and how do we create new worlds? So some of those new worlds that we're creating on stage, we need to bring into real life and use some of that imagination, use some of that creativity to create a real world around us that works for everybody.
Yeah. And I'll let you say what the third session is, and then I'll ask questions about the sessions, and I'll let people ask questions in the chat as well.
Cool. So the third and final session, it's going to be on two things. One, going into the history of anti-Blackness. How have we continued to live in a world throughout the history of colonization where anti-Blackness is just pervasive? It's everywhere. And it's one of those other things that literally doesn't get called out. Even particularly within POC communities, anti-Blackness doesn't get called out. So we're just going to be talking about what is anti-Black racism, what's the history of it, where did that language come from, and then how do we move away from that towards a more liberated world. And then just weaving in and out of all of the session is going to be this movement history of how did we get to where we are today? How did we get to 2020, living in one of the largest uprisings ever? And that interweaves throughout this political education on Equity 101, white dominant culture, and anti-Black racism.
Are the sessions like lectures? Are they interactive? Are they in dialogue? Are they in groups? What can folks expect when they come into the space?
Yeah, yes. I would never, so each session is an hour and a half. I would never just sit and talk to anyone for an hour and a half. So it's going to be as much discussion as possible. It's going to be trying to build off the histories and narratives and experiences of folks who are joining into these sessions. So this is about not just learning from folks who have studied this in educational institutions, but this is about learning from each other and learning from our own narratives, learning from how we have come to this work. So there will be breakout sessions. There will be some grounding on language and on some terms, but mostly we want it to be a space where folks are really allowed to engage with the material and grow. And, you know, there's this concept called principled struggle attributed to a Tanya Lee that we always bring up. And principled struggle just tells us that there is no growth without struggle. So we want to struggle with these terms together so we can grow together.
Man, that's good. That's good. And this one is a Broadway focused 3-day session. Will we be grappling and struggling with issues within our own community, or we're looking at the larger picture and just like relating that on our own to how this may affect us inside the industry?
Yeah, no, this is going to be tailored and specific to the Broadway community.
Wow.
So we will have some opportunity to really talk through what are the internal issues that take place within Broadway, what is the inequities that take place within Broadway, and how do we call that out? And how do we build really an organizing plan to respond to that? One thing that has been so refreshing to see over the summer, not only organizations like Broadway Advocacy Coalition really on the front lines of these issues, but Black Theater United. There's so many different folks that are at the front lines of these issues, building new organizations to really confront the moment that we're living in right now. So it's an exciting moment to really pull all of our heads together,
Right.
to think critically about how do we create new worlds together.
Someone just said, will these trainings be recorded to view if we have time conflicts?
It's a good question. Let me get back to folks on that.
Great. Are there any other questions that y'all have? I can keep on going, but I want to make sure there's space, and I also want to honor your time and not take up too much time. I'm sure you got other Zooms and things to do this Sunday. I actually hope you don't have to do shit. I feel like you seem like you got too much to do, which I appreciate. Like one thought I have, doing liberation work, sometimes I wonder, can you do liberation work for others without doing it for yourself first?
I actually don't think you can. There's an Aboriginal quote that says, if you have come here to help me, then you can go home. But if you have come here because you realize that my liberation is interwoven with yours and we need to get free together, then let us work together.
Yeah.
So I actually think that anybody just trying to come into this space to help someone else needs to do a little bit more internal reflection, because we all have to come to this work with a self-reflection of our own histories of how we come to this world. Right. And, when it comes to privilege, like we are all holding privileges and we are all holding various forms of disadvantage. So we have to come with that and lay everything down and really try to imagine together. So no, you can't just be doing this for somebody else. It really has to be a deep interpersonal thing that you're bringing to the table.
Amen. Amen. Guys, I want to give you all a little bit of space to ask any questions, and if I'm missing anything, Jonathan, that you think needs to be said, I'm gonna make sure that this is in our link, and so folks can register. Should folks come to all 3 sessions? Is that recommended? Or if I had to only come to one, like, will I have missed something if I didn't come to the first one?
Folks can pop in and out. It really depends on the person. I encourage folks to try to join all 3 sessions. I believe if you go to the registration link, thank you, Sada, for just posting that, bit.ly Broadway Equity, bit.ly/Broadway Equity, you'll see kind of the description of the sessions. And there are, we did provide backup sessions. If you weren't able to attend that first session, please just shoot us an email and we can have backup sessions for folks.
Are you serious? There's
Yes.
backup sessions, y'all. Did you hear that? Wow, that's very nice. And are the sessions free? How much do they cost?
Yes, so this session has been sponsored by Sada Ramirez. Shout out to Sada again. So they are free for folks to just come into the room and struggle with us, and let's
Wow.
build a better society together.
Sarah, this is for you, Sarah. That's how I say thank you without my words. Feel that.
Love
Thank
it.
you. I'm
Free,
so
free, free.
excited. I'm so excited for that. Thank you for your time, Jonathan. I can't wait to be there, and I'm gonna do my best to invite friends and the rest of the community who needs this. Such a blessing, really.
Yo, I have to end it on back to the point. We are living in a government society that is leaning on fascism right now to the point where they are censoring this body of knowledge for federal workers. So I think for folks who want to be in the movement, for folks who want this body of knowledge, it's not only important that we gather this knowledge, but it's even more so important that we share it with our families and our communities and our coworkers. So each one teach one. That's what we're going to be about.
Right, 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 right. Absolutely. Hey, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it, and I'll see you
Hey,
soon.
I appreciate y'all. I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.
Yeah. What? What? Y'all coming? Who's coming? Let me hear it. Who's coming? Who's bringing someone? This is great. I'm coming. I need this. I need Britton, the human, not Britton, the anything else, no role, no identity, just the human. I can tell I'm gonna learn so much from this. Um, please join us, join us, join us. Make sure this is a free 3-part training. Um, and I yeah, first of all, I'm grateful that it's free, and I can't wait to share it with people. Again, it is on October 6th, 13th, and the 20th. We're gonna put the link in our bio so that folks can see that. Someone asked if it's just for the Broadway community or can others join? That is a good question. Um, I imagine if you're on this page, you're someone interested in theater, which means you're in the industry in some form, or I'm not sure. Um, I want to make sure I don't say the wrong thing. So, Jonathan or Sada, if you're here and you know that answer, please let me know. But we at the Broadway Advocacy Coalition know that Broadway is a name, Broadway Advocacy Coalition, but it's really about industry issues, and that's regionally, that's around our country, theaters, even students we consider a part of the theater industry. We're attempting to prioritize folks in the theater, Broadway community, to make sure they get first dibs. So yes, we are prioritizing folks in the theater slash Broadway community. And I imagine that there will be more. Thanks for that, Sada. But there's plenty of space for folks outside the industry too. Great. So it sounds like whoever asked that question, you should just register, and I bet you'll be all right to come. Yeah, sounds like you'd be all right to come. Um, Everybody enjoy the rest of your Sunday wherever you are. I wish you all true health and care, and I'm really proud that people are curious, and I'm excited for my own curiosity to be fed through these sessions. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Everybody send Jonathan some love, man. That's a powerful man right there. Wow. Okay. Talk soon. Be well. Bye-bye.